Hello, this is Chuck Ridgway, Automation Technology Manager at Horner. Thanks for joining us for another Tuesday live stream. Well, you're probably wondering, what's with the bicycle? Well, today we're starting a new summer series, and I thought it would be fun to share with you some of my favorite summer activities over the course of the series. And this is my bicycle, and riding my bicycle is definitely one of my favorite summer activities. Now, for the past few summers, I've done some week-long bike tours, and probably the most memorable is called RAGBRAI. It's a week-long ride across Iowa that's the largest group ride in the United States. In any given year, there could be between 10 and 30,000 riders. It's kind of like a roving carnival across the state of Iowa. At every small town along the route, they roll out the red carpet and the comfort food. So they've got fried pork chops, and ice cream socials, and pie bake-offs, and deep fried everything. To give you an idea, over the course of the week, I rode my bicycle about 430 miles and gained 5 pounds. It's a lot of fun and highly recommended, but it's not a weight loss activity. Now, enough about me and my bicycle. Let's get into this summer series. As some of you may have heard, we've announced that on July 1st, we'll be releasing Cscape 10 as a free download. That's right, July 1st for Cscape 10. So this is the summer of Cscape. For the first 3 weeks prior to release, we'll be focusing on the features you need to know in order to hit the ground running with Cscape 10, regardless of which OCS series that you typically use. And then after release, we're going to turn our focus a little bit to those Canvas graphics-related features in Cscape 10. For those of you who are not familiar, Canvas is the new OCS all-in-one controller series we're releasing concurrently with Cscape 10 on July 1st. Now let's kick off the series with today's topic. We're going to kick off the series with the Cscape 10 user interface. We thought it was very important that you find your way around Cscape 10 as quickly as possible once you start working with the new software, so we're starting with the user interface. And here's how we're breaking down the topic. We're going to start with the 3 newest elements to the user interface: the quick menu button, the ribbon toolbar, and the quick access toolbar. Then we're going to show you how you can customize your settings, your ladder appearance, your desktop layout, and we're going to give you a sneak peek of screen editing in tabs, which is one of the biggest differences in the user interface in Cscape 10. Although in much greater detail, we'll cover graphics editing and screen editing in a couple weeks. Okay, let's take a look at some of these new user interface elements in Cscape 10. All right, let's start with the quick menu button, which you will find right here. Next, we've got the ribbon toolbar, which you will find in the next level down. Now, this is the most major change from a user interface standpoint in Cscape 10, and that's going to take probably the most practiced or the most working with to get familiar with Cscape 10 so you can be highly efficient. So you'll need to really take a look at how things are organized with this new ribbon toolbar, because most of what people are used to are strictly pull-down menus in Cscape 9. Now above, at least by default, the ribbon toolbar, we have up here, we have the quick access toolbar. So that's what you see here, this series of icons there. Okay, so those are the 3 major new user interface features. Let's start exploring them a bit. Okay, so we don't have a program open right now. Let's go up to the quick menu button, press that. And here we can see this is where we can create a new program. We can open an existing program. We can see any recent programs or documents that we had open. And then once we have a program open, we're going to have more options to deal with here. But for now, let's just hit new. Now, once I do that, then we see all of the available logic editor types that are in Cscape. Now, you may not see all of these types in your fresh install of Cscape 10. The options that you see here are dependent on your settings and we haven't reviewed settings yet. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and select an advanced ladder with variable-based addressing here, and then you can see things start to fill in. Okay, so in my case, this is how I like to have my desktop set up. I'm going to show you all how to set up your desktop. But adding on to those elements I've already described, we have some features that carry over from Cscape 9. We have the Project Navigator, which has received quite a few changes, and we'll kind of be going through those as we go through the series here. We've also got our project toolbox here on the right, and then on the bottom we have the program variable window. Now this just happens to be where I like to have these elements organized. Later on in today's video, I'm going to show you how to reorganize these maybe the way you want them instead of the way I want them. And after your default clean install of Cscape 10, you're probably not going to see all of these elements here in these locations. Okay, now let's explore the ribbon toolbar in detail. Okay, so again, this is the ribbon toolbar, and it is organized into tabs. You have the Home tab, the Edit tab, Logic Editing, User Interface, Debug, Tools, My Account, and Help. Now the way the ribbon toolbar has been designed with Cscape 10, for the most part, you're probably going to spend your most time on the Home tab. That's because the most frequently used type functions in Cscape are for the most part all available on the Home tab. Now in the View group here, this is where you can select and deselect the Project Navigator, the Program Variable window, the Project Toolbox, the Output window, all of those sorts of things. So I have most of those selected right now. Next to that, we have the Controller group where you can set the target ID, you can invoke the connection wizard, you can jump into hardware configuration. Now there's a number of ways to jump into the hardware configuration. This is just one of them. And then once we're online with a controller, we're going to have more choices. We'll be able to see download, upload, verify, run, do I/O, and stop. So again, the controller group is definitely one that will get a lot of use. There's also an online change group where we can go into online change mode, we can perform a download, we can revert back to a previous program before an online change. That is options that we have there. Okay, and then now we've also got the program group. What can you do in the program group? Well, you can take a look at your element usage. You can perform an error check on your program, which you may want to do prior to download, even though it automatically happens on a download. And then also, as an example, you can configure your email and your MQTT under messaging, along with other options as well. You can access your protocols. Now, there's multiple ways of accessing your protocols, whether they're serial protocols or Ethernet protocols, okay? But this is one of them. And then under the data group here, you can access data logging, the report editor, the recipe databases, all those sorts of things. So as you can see, there's a lot of functionality here in the Home group. Now, some of these other ones, really, you probably won't spend that much time on. The Edit group could be useful, but for instance, for copy, paste, cut, and select all, I typically use keyboard shortcuts. So in my personal case, I probably won't use this group that much, but maybe I'll use it for the find function, or something like that. But I have other ways of accessing find, for instance, that we'll show you later. Let's take a look at the logic editing group. Again, probably not a group I'm going to use that often, but it's there. Okay, if I want to create a new ladder block or a new subroutine, I can do that from here. But I can also do that from the Project Navigator, which might be easier for some folks, and definitely I consider that easier for me. Now here in the logic view options, you could choose to zoom in on your logic a little bit here with this control, turn on and off your grid lines, those sorts of things. Okay, so again, for me personally, the logic editing group isn't one I'll probably use all that frequently. Now, one I will use a lot though is the user interface group. There's tons of functionality here. So I would say for me personally, probably the Home and the user interface are going to be the most heavily used. So under screens, keep in mind, most of these functions under the user interface group are all things that you previously in Cscape 9 and earlier versions had to access from the graphics editor. Remember, the way we edit graphics in Cscape 10 has changed. We haven't covered it yet, but we edit graphics, or screens if you will, in tabs, not in a separate graphics editor that pops over and takes over the entire program. So a lot of these functions were previously only available in the graphics editor. You know, things like viewing your thumbnails, the thumbnails of your screen, if you will, setting up your alarms, setting user security, going through your WebMI configuration, adding multiple languages to your project, Spanish and German and other languages for those machines that go overseas, dealing with fonts for legacy type controllers or for even current type controllers like the Micro OCS and the XL Prime. So as you can see, there's all kinds of graphical type functions that are accessible from the user interface tab. So this is one of the more useful ones. As we go to debug, we have some tools, again, not used that heavily. You know, we have the chart recorder function, we have the remote terminal that a lot of people don't even know exists for simple screens like you might find on an XLE, for instance. Let's go to the tools menu and take a look at that one. Here we have another way of accessing the connection wizard. We have ways of accessing the passwords. We have ways of dealing with variables, you know, register backup, if you will, and restoring. That is definitely useful here, but of course we have to be online with a controller to see these. And then a couple more here at the end. My account, where you can go in and change your profile for your Cscape login credentials when you're logging into Cscape and your account is tied to the Horner website, for instance. And then the help tab. This is where you can access all kinds of help information. With Cscape 10, help is an online based help, even though if you're not online at the time, you don't have internet access at the time, there will be a local copy of the help information on your computer that you can access, again, when you're not online. And then you can do things like check for updates. You can click on a link that'll take you directly to our how-to video library, and then also quickly see the phone numbers for tech support, whether you're talking about US or Europe, for instance. Okay, so again, with this ribbon toolbar, this is something you'll need to get used to, but I think you'll find that you'll spend most of your time on home and also on the user interface settings and then sections, and then maybe you might also spend some time here under help, just accessing the help information for Cscape 10. Okay, now let's take a look at the quick access toolbar, which you will find by default here at the top. This is a collection of commands. Each command has an icon, and by default, we've got a set of them here that you can work with. All right, and you can customize these by pressing this down arrow button. Okay, I'll do that now. And you can see all of these different commands which have corresponding icons, and these are the default, or this is the default set. But I can, you know, get rid of some of these. I can change the order. I can add more commands, and here's how I do that. I go under more commands, and then under the different categories, if I want to add additional commands to my list, I can do that. So let's go under user interface, and let's say we want to add the configure alarms capability to our quick access toolbar. So I found the particular command that I want to add in its category. I hit add. By default, it puts it at the bottom, and then I just move it up to the location where I want it. So let's say I want it before the login functions here, near the end but not at the end. Okay, so I've done that, and I can hit OK. And now you can see that it's customized to how I want it. Now another thing you can do is you can actually move the quick access toolbar below the ribbon toolbar if you choose. I'll show you how to do that now. Show below the ribbon. Okay, so now while it takes up a little more space because it doesn't take up this empty space up here, it may be a more convenient location that you prefer better. Now, one other thing that you may not be aware of, and that is within the controls for the customized quick access toolbar, when you go back under more commands, down here at the bottom, this is where you can find all the keyboard shortcuts. So these are all the shortcuts, the things like Control C, Control A, Control V, for cut, copy, and paste, those sorts of things. But then for all these other functions, you can actually either create new keyboard shortcuts for ones that don't have one right now, for instance, or you can change the ones that are existing. So I know people like Nate Beachy really like those keyboard shortcuts and take advantage of them. So you have a lot of capability of customizing those, but you need to know that those are accessible from the Quick Access Toolbar function. All right, let's take a look at another improvement in Cscape 10 with the user interface. So I'm going to head to the quick menu button here. And the last selection is settings. So with Cscape 10, I have one location for all of my settings. In Cscape 9, you've got a couple different dialog boxes you need to look for. Now they're both in the tools area, but I'm always getting the wrong one. You know, I'm looking to change a certain setting and there's two options for which dialog I need to pick, and I always pick the wrong one. With Cscape 10, they're all unified, so that makes it much better from an improvement standpoint. Now there are still some new things here. Let me go through the new things first, and we'll come back to the familiar things. Appearance. For your ribbon toolbar, you can select between 4 different color themes. Okay. Logic display, and we're going to go through this one specifically here in a few minutes. You have a lot of control over the colors, the font sizes, the shape of your function blocks, all those sorts of things. We'll show you how to do all that control with the logic display area. And then compiler options is also completely new. And this is something that we're going to cover in great detail next week when we talk about how Cscape 10 handles variable-based ladder type variables on download. Okay, so those are the new things. Most of the rest of these things aren't new, they're just in an easier place to find. You know, what makes up an error, what makes up a warning? These have existed before, but now this and all the other settings are in the same location. Ladder numbering, okay? Download, all the different download options. Application settings, this is the location where you select the different languages you want to be able to support when you create a new project. Okay, communications, again, communicating with the controller. So all these are things that have existed before, but they were scattered in a couple different locations, and they've been unified with Cscape 10. Okay, now let's go back into the settings area available from the quick menu button, and let's focus in on this logic display. So let's explore how we can completely customize the way graphics looks like in our ladder logic graphic editing area. So I'm going to press this button here and see all the different things that I can change and customize. So first of all, you do have multiple schemes available. I tend to like just to stick with the classic and play around with that to get the look and feel I want. You can also go with a dark theme or a light theme where a lot of things have been selected for you. Okay, let's start with the background color for the logic editing area. Okay, I kind of like this light blue or maybe the traditional light gray, but you have your choice of all kinds of different colors here, you know, even a green if you want to go with a green, but I'm going to stick with my light blue here. Under the labels for the colors, you can not only the colors, but also the font and the size. I can make these a little bit bigger. If we take a look at the labels on the contacts and coils, for instance, there. Okay, so I can adjust the font as well as the size. On the wiring, I can decide that, okay, I can leave it black by default, or I can decide, hey, let's go with a different color there. Yeah, I'll probably stick with black, but again, you have lots of choices here. Under your comments, what color do you want the text? What size do you want the text? If you want the text to be a little smaller, if you want the font color to be a little different, you've got a lot of options there. Again, to make sure things look the way you want them to look. For your function blocks, maybe you want them to stand out a little bit against the background. Maybe you don't want, you know, them to be the exact same color. So you can find maybe a slightly contrasting color that maybe makes it stand out a little bit more. Whatever, you know, is really what appeals to you. It doesn't matter what I like, for instance. And if you'd prefer to have a rounded rectangle instead of a regular rectangle, you know, that's an option for you as well. And then on your grid, you can change your grid from a dot to a solid line. You can control the thickness of the grid. On your column settings and your row settings, of course, you can control the colors and the fonts and the color of the printing and all that kind of good stuff. So anyway, you have much more complete control over the way your ladder logic appears on the desktop than you've had in previous versions of Cscape. All right, now let's take a look at how we can rearrange our desktop in Cscape 10. All right, now this is kind of a layout that I've always liked. I like having the navigator on the left. I like having the toolbar on the right. I like having program variables here on the bottom. But if I want to move things around, I have a lot more control in Cscape 10 than I had in Cscape 9. So let me kind of illustrate that. So as an example, when I click and drag and start moving something around, deciding where I want to place it, like my program variable window or Project Navigator, what have you, I have the ability to select these arrows. And by putting my mouse over those arrows, it will show me where it's going to put it. So if I want my program variables next to my Project Navigator, I can do that. If instead I want it to be on the far right side, I can navigate over here and touch this far right control here. Or if I would rather have it left of my project toolbar, I can put it there as well. So again, you've got a lot more control over where you put everything, which is nice. Definitely, I do like that. And again, for me, I'm going to be boring and go back to kind of what I always do. Now, if I put it here, okay, that's fine. It puts it at the bottom. But what if I also want the output window to be down there as well, but I don't want it stacked on top of it. I want it next to each other. Well, let's try this. Let's click and drag. Let's put it at the very bottom. Well, all I've done is flip those around now. But now what if I want the output window to be down here instead? What if that's really what I'm going after? I can click, come down here, and now as soon as I enter this region, I can make this selection right there, and boom, now I've got that output window where I want, and then I can just use this simple control here to, allocate the room between the two. So again, much more fine control with this new approach of those sets of arrows for really customizing the layout of your desktop. Okay, now the last thing I'm going to show you is really just a sneak peek of what we're going to start from, or where we're going to start when we're talking about editing graphics and editing screens in a couple weeks. Okay, so one of the major differences in the user interface, and we're not going to cover it in a lot of detail, but I'm going to introduce it to you now, is the ability to edit screens, not in a separate editor that's kind of laying on top of the logic, but in a tab alongside the logic. So let's go ahead and just quickly create a screen, and I can show you what I mean there. Okay, so I'm going to go over here to the Project Navigator. I'm going down to User Interface. I'm going to expand that. There's a variety of ways I can create a new screen, but one of the common ways would be to click on Main Screen, right-click and say New Screen. This is where I can name it. So maybe this is a main menu or something, so I can name it here. After I name it, it will put in parentheses the number of the screen, because screen numbers are still important when you want to trigger them from one of the screen variables, if you will. But anyway, once I've done that, you can see that it creates a screen editing tab and puts it alongside of my logic tabs that are already open. So now when I want to go in here and I want to edit graphics, again, I'm doing it from a tab alongside my logic, not from an editor that's sitting on top of it. And I've got all kinds of other controls here, some of which are new for editing graphics, and we're going to cover that 2 weeks from now when we talk about graphic editing or screen editing in detail in Cscape 10, regardless of what controller you have. And then later in the summer, we're going to talk specifically about Canvas-related graphics or features that are exclusive to Canvas, but not yet. The next 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about features that are not exclusive to Canvas, but that apply completely to any modern OCS that is already out there today. Okay, that wraps up our topic for today. For those of you who might want to see a little bit of fun footage from my RAGBRAI bicycle trip, you can stick around to the very end. But in either case, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, don't hesitate to do so. It doesn't cost anything. And if you choose notifications when you subscribe, you'll be notified every time we go live or every time we post a new video. Okay, so until next week and our next Cscape 10 related topic for the summer of Cscape, let's all get out there and do us some good. Okay, let's talk about RAGBRAI. Now this, I would say, is probably the bucket list type bike ride for anybody in the United States. And you don't have to be any kind of heavy duty bicycle rider to do RAGBRAI. I saw athletes of all different shapes and sizes, and people I would definitely not call athletes. Certainly, I'm no super athlete myself, and I was able to make it through just fine. Now my RAGBRAI journey actually started on a train because it's so convenient to bring your bicycle on a train. You just hand it to the conductor in the baggage car. I rode the train to Omaha, Nebraska, which was close to Sergeant Bluff, which was the starting point of the ride. We then, the next morning, after arriving on the train, I transferred to a shuttle bus that I paid for that took me to the starting city of Sergeant Bluff, Iowa. There's a shot of me relaxing after I checked in Sergeant Bluff. I had no idea what I was in for. Now a question I get a lot is, where did you sleep? Well, the answer is wherever we could find a place to camp, or wherever our outfitter could find us a place to camp. We slept in Little League fields, which is what you see here, high school football fields, municipal parks, you name it, wherever they could find a place for about 200 of us in our group. That's where we camped. Here's a shot of me after that first night of camping, getting up bright and early. I've got the camera on my helmet, look a little bit like a dweeb. I'm taking pictures, selfies, just like the other folks, getting ready for that first big day of riding. Now, whenever we would arrive in a community in a small town along the route, maybe every 10 or 15 miles, this is pretty much what you would see. Street vendors everywhere, not just food, but also souvenir shops, souvenir stands, I guess I should say, bicycle stands for doing some quickie bike repair, and of course the food. You name it, they had it. Barbecue, brisket, fried pork chops, fried whatever. They had like Caribbean chicken, like at this place right here. Fried peanut butter and jelly, you name it. And here's a sample of some of the things I ate. A terrific barbecue sandwich, a beef bowl, a walking taco, something really simple, and then church dinners galore with chicken and dumplings and fried chicken and spaghetti and garlic bread. Incredible. No wonder I gained 5 pounds. And of course, homemade pie, apple pie, blueberry pie, rhubarb pie, pie everywhere. And why did I eat so much? Because I was starving. After a day of riding anywhere from 40 to 100 miles, I was ready to eat. Here's a shot of me kind of chilling by my tent after I set up my tent after the long day's ride, before I had my shower, before dinner. And I believe this was the day in which we rode 100 miles. That was the first time I'd ever done that. Did it once, haven't done it since. Here's my bike computer with the proof. Another thing people ask me is, did you get any good footage with your helmet cam, and did anything kind of dangerous happen? Well, we'll get both of them taken care of in this one shot. So this is the downhill coming into the finish by the Mississippi River. And for those that say Iowa is completely flat, certainly not on this downhill. We were probably doing 30 or 35 miles an hour, maybe a little more than that even. And as you can see, I'm kind of drifting over the center line, even though the road wasn't completely closed, but I get over as soon as a curve comes up. Another rider, not so much. Oh, that's cutting it way too close in my estimation. Okay, so that wraps up my RAGBRAI experience in front of a giant ear of corn. Why not? Now, again, you don't have to be any kind of super athlete to do this ride. If you can work your way up to, say, 100 miles in a week during your training, where on at least one of the days you're doing at least 40 miles, which you can do, then you certainly can handle RAGBRAI. Highly recommended. Get it on your bucket list.